Okay. I think that maybe we should just start about talking about your origin story,
Sure.
right? And I'll tell you how the areas that I want to cover. It really is like that video that you posted, that you pinned, where you talk about the discovering having cancer and the anxiety of telling people, but then that reward mechanism that kicks in when you do have like all this support and people, it almost like you made it sound like I understand why these people fake cancer because they're getting off on this high, right? And
Yes.
so let's just kind of walk through that. I think that the what's interesting about your story is that you actually did have cancer, and so that's what makes it different. But yeah, I mean, why don't you just start? First of all, introduce yourself. I may or may not use it, and then tell me how did you discover you had cancer?
Sure. Thanks. So my name is Bill Petrich, and I call myself the faking cancer expert on TikTok and elsewhere because I've spent the last 15 plus years tracking these cases, researching these people, and really learning everything I can about the deep dark world of faking cancer, which is not an area I ever imagined I would call my own. But 15 years ago, I was a senior in college in Michigan. I was 21 years old. I was a liberal arts student, so I didn't have any biology background. If you would have asked me what cancer was, I mean, I could have told you it was a deadly disease, but on a biological level, I didn't really know what cancer was. I didn't know how it worked. But I knew that I was feeling pretty sick my senior year of college. My head was getting bigger and bigger. My neck was really sore. Like I knew something was seriously wrong with me. And so finally, I went into the student clinic one morning and basically explained my symptoms. And I had a really good doctor who gave me a chest x ray and pretty much immediately identified like a big mass on the film that was indicative of lymphoma and was basically like, okay, we need to get you to the hospital ASAP. So he put me in a cab, and a few minutes later, I'm at the ER, and basically was in the hospital for the next 2 weeks, getting biopsied and treated and diagnosed and like everything you can imagine, every test, every blood draw, and it was a big shock to me, as you can imagine, being a 21-year-old who had never really thought about cancer. But in this weird way, and this is the pretty early social media period. Everyone has smartphones at this point. Facebook is dominant already. Um, in addition to it being a really shocking personal experience, there was also this element of like, this is the biggest piece of Bill news anyone's ever heard. Like, this is outrageously juicy gossip that a 21-year-old has cancer in college. Like, my friends aren't going to believe this. And so even from the beginning, while I was worried about my own health, like I was also hyper aware of the fact that this was a social event in my life too. This was something I had to tell people. This was something that people would have a reaction to that I would have to manage and deal with. Um, and the more I told people, the more it became apparent that this was like almost a power that you had over people, because it's just so shocking when you hear that one of your peers, a young person, has cancer. People, fly into action. They want to help you. They want to do things for you. They want to praise you. They want to be there for you and hold your arm. Um, and thankfully, I had a lot of friends, and I didn't feel like I had this, big emotional void in my life that needed to be filled by people feeling sorry for me. But it became pretty obvious that if you did have an emotional void in your life, if you did want to manipulate people, like telling them you have cancer is a really good way to do it, because it changes how people look at you. It changes how people react. It's almost a force in the room when a young person tells you that they have cancer. It instills fear in people. It instills love in some people, and just really kicks in that instinct to like do something.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and I was going to say that you described your cancer experience not always presenting yourself as if you had cancer. Like from the outside, some people would have thought you were fine because you were playing sports, you were out and about. Like, kind of describe that.
yeah, it was important to me as a 21-year-old that I didn't just become a patient who was sick, and that was the long and short of my story. I still felt like me. I was still me inside. I wanted cancer to be as normal of a medical condition as possible that I could treat and move on from. Um, and like a lot of millennials in at that period, and still, I didn't want to do it in like the Lifetime movie. Oh, it's so sad. Have you heard about Bill? Kind of invalid style. Like a lot of millennials, I still wanted to be me. I wanted to inject some humor. I wanted to maybe surprise people by how normal someone with cancer could look. So I got to the point where I was almost nonchalant about it. I would drop the fact that I had cancer as like the third or fourth thing in a sentence in conversation, almost to get a reaction out of people, because I knew it was like shocking, and I knew it was shocking to be matter of fact about having cancer. So I'd roll into class, I'd mention it, but I wouldn't make it like the main thing, and it was kind of a social experiment. I was going through a lot at the time. It wasn't like that was all I was doing, but it was interesting to see people have to like treat it like something that's more normal and not like the biggest tragedy you've ever heard of. So yeah, I played intramural sports. I still, had a sex life. I still worked a job. I was still trying to be a pretty normal college student. But that diagnosis was definitely still like an element in the room for my peers. And I even had a cancer party when I got out of the hospital, and I didn't want it to be a sad party. I like was making jokes the whole time. I was taking pictures. I was being pretty inappropriate, which in retrospect, like, kind of seemed like maybe I was faking it. If someone was thinking that way. I don't think anyone was thinking that way at the time. No one really knew about faking cancer 15 years ago, but I was acting kind of outlandish, and in retrospect, it was like a defense mechanism, or it was a survival technique to like normalize the diagnosis as much as I could. But it was probably weird for other people. And I can imagine some people in the back of their head being like, this doesn't really seem like how someone with cancer is supposed to behave.
Yeah, because at that time that you're describing, do you have like a shaved head, or like, do you
Yeah.
appear like you have cancer, or did you had not started that chemotherapy yet?
Yeah, I did have a shaved head, and that was really the main indicator physically that I had cancer. But unlike a lot of people with cancer, I gained weight when I was in treatment, and like my head got bigger. I had this like big medical chain that was like an alert to medics that I was on blood thinners, basically. But bald, bigger, with like a metal chain, I kind of just looked like I thought I was tough. Like I looked like kind of like a weightlifter with a chain, a bald head, kind of like I was taking steroids or something. Like
Yeah.
if you saw me, your first thought wouldn't have been that guy has cancer. It would have been like that guy looks like kind of a gym bro.
Exactly. And the great thing is, like you said, you kind of won the cancer lottery in terms of like the type of cancer and how treatable it is. Can you kind of
Yeah,
tell the audience about your recovery and where
sure.
you are now?
Yeah, I had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, very treatable at that time and still today. I think lymphomas have something like a 90% plus survival rate after 5 years, especially for, young, otherwise healthy people like I was. So from go, I knew from my doctors that they were really optimistic, and so I kind of just assumed the sale. I went with what they told me. I didn't spend a lot of time Googling like what could go wrong. I kind of just was like, okay, they're confident. This is treatable. A lot of people get through this. I'm going to get through this. Full speed ahead kind of thing. And it went really well. I think treatment was 6 months. I had 6 rounds of chemo, and then I did a month of radiation, and the tumor was gone. And I was declared in remission at the very end of my senior year of college, and 15 years later, knock on wood, hasn't come back. So, went about as smooth as it could have gone.
But it definitely is a big bookmark in your life, and obviously has influenced the work that you've been taking on the
For
side, right?
sure.
Tell me about like how you made that like your mission to find these people who fake cancer and then talk to them, and how'd that come about?
Yeah, I didn't, when I was told I was in remission, I was pretty eager to not have to think about cancer anymore. I graduated, I moved to Washington, D.C. I was trying to find a job. I was just trying to be a normal, recent grad. Um, but although treatment went really well, relatively speaking, it still changed me. I mean, I spent my senior year of college thinking about my mortality rather than like trying to figure out if I wanted to go to law school or where I wanted to move or whatever. I was just on a different emotional wavelength than most 22-year-old recent grads. I was thinking a lot about death. I was thinking a lot about the medical system and what had happened to me and how cancer had changed me. And I found it was really difficult to talk about this stuff with other like 22, 23-year-olds. I kind of got into this bad habit, Javier, where I would go out with friends, I would get drunk, and I would find myself like going on about cancer to some stranger who was like horrified that I was talking about it so casually at like happy hour. And this kept happening. And my friends were like, dude, I think you might need to see a therapist, or
Yeah.
like you need to work through this somewhere that isn't like full of young, drunk, happy people trying to have a good time. 'Cause
Yeah,
it's a
yeah,
real buzz.
buzzkill.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
buzzkill.
But I mean,
But it
you
was
have to talk about it, It's
right, yeah. Like to me, it wasn't a like to me. I made it so normal for myself that I almost lost sight of how shocking it is to
yeah.
someone who isn't thinking about cancer all the time. But that was my state of mind when, I don't know, it was 6 months or so after treatment or whatever, something within the year after treatment. I was just like up late one night, just kind of looking. I don't even remember if it was on my phone or on my computer. I was just kind of going through the news aimlessly, and I saw a headline about someone who had been caught faking cancer. And I mean, my jaw hit the floor because I'd never heard of anyone faking cancer, but in a weird way, like within a split second, it like occurred to me that like, oh, of course that's a thing. Like, of course that would be a thing because I saw so many social benefits from faking cancer, and I was able to wield some kind of dark social power just by having cancer among other young people who aren't used to it. That it made sense to me that people would want that power and would want that influence without having to go through the medical part of it. And so I like went down the rabbit hole that night, and I wanted to see if other people were doing this, figuring, maybe this has happened a couple times. And a cursory Google search was like, oh, this is happening all over the place. There's 10, 20, 30 articles about different cases that I can find just by Googling around in like 2011 or 2012 or whenever it was. Um, and that kind of shocked me, just how seemingly common it was. And each story you would read, it would be like this unthinkable, monstrous act that no one could ever imagine. And you read that kind of prose in several different articles, and it was like, well, maybe someone needs to start imagining that this is a thing that happens. And so I really wanted to find like the New Yorker article putting a bow on the phenomenon, what it meant that people faked cancer, or the deep dive long read from the New York Times or whatever it was. And that didn't exist because no one had covered it as a larger phenomena. It was really just a case by case local news kind of sensationalizing this monster among us has lied to their family. And that was really unsatisfying to me because, I was in my early 20s. Like, I didn't think these people were monsters. I thought they were stupid millennials who were seeking attention, but that didn't seem that aberrant to me because that was my milieu. Those were my peers. And it seemed like enough people were doing this that it wasn't really about the individual. Clearly, there were incentives at play here that were bigger than just the individual. And so originally I was like, I need to like start keeping track of these cases and seeing how common this is. And if no one's reporting on this, maybe I need to be doing that. I felt like really motivated that I had the qualifications as someone who had had cancer and had been thinking about the social dynamics of having cancer. And so I didn't have any like goal of a book or a podcast or whatever. I just wanted to know more. I was so curious. And so I started keeping track of cases in a spreadsheet, really so I could just start to see some demographic information. And within the first few months, I mean, some stuff became really obvious. One is that this was like millennials were doing this more than older people, that it was really more common among like teenagers and people in their 20s and early 30s. It wasn't really something middle-aged or older people were doing. It was predominantly women who were doing it, like 3-to-1 ratio of women to men, and it was mostly white women. The avatar of the cancer faker seemed to be sort of like a white American woman in her 20s from Middle America. Um, and years and years of keeping track of these cases. I wasn't doing this like full time. Obviously, it was kind of like I hesitate to call it a hobby because it's such a weird hobby, but it was a side project for several years, sort of building up this spreadsheet, and learning more and more about why people do this and what the ins and outs of some of these cases were. It was really only 5 or so years ago, like a decade into doing this, that I decided I want to take this to the next level and actually start contacting these people, reaching out to the victims, talking to clinical psychologists, learning even more about this world. So for the last 5 or so years, I've done a lot more of that. I talk to a number of cancer fakers. I've got ongoing text conversations with a handful of people who've been caught faking cancer, who have been really open-hearted and willing to talk to me, and just talk to a wide range of like people involved with these scams at every level.
Have you ever said who these people that you're talking to are, or do you keep them anonymous?
No, not publicly. I at some point I'm hoping that I will have a show of my own that really dives deeper into some of these. So I've been kind of holding my
Yeah.
fire, and part of it is just that these people trust me and have been really good to like open their heart about the
Yeah.
darkest thing that they've ever done, and so I'm happy to protect their privacy at this point. I'm not ever trying to dox
Right.
anyone or like expose anyone. I'm,
Yeah.
I'm more grateful when someone's willing to talk to me.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the point of it was for you to learn these things, not to like, you know, gain off of their,
Right.
this whatever. But you categorize, what I think is kind of interesting is that you categorize these fakers, cancer fakers, like into categories. And I know some of them overlap, but can you kind of walk us through some of these categories? I mean, one of them seems more obvious than the others, but go ahead and just kind of walk through them.
Sure. The 99% of cancer fakers fall into two major categories, and that's that they're motivated by money, or they're motivated by social gain. And there's a huge amount of overlap between the two. But there's some people who are only motivated by money, so maybe they've created a lie on GoFundMe, and the whole point is really just to solicit donations, get that money, pay for their lifestyle, whatever it is, and it's really just financially motivated. And a lot of people assume that most cancer fakers are just going to be out there trying to scam money, because in this day and age, there's so many scams. Every telemarketer, every time you pick up the phone, someone's trying to bilk money out of you. So it's not surprising to anyone that anyone would be lying to make money. But I've found that most cancer fakers are not just doing it for money. And the
Can
one,
we? Oh, before you move on to the next one, I do want to ask you about the money thing, but finish your thought first.
yeah, I think most people assume that most cancer fakers are in it for money primarily. I've found that that's often not the case, that it's actually more common for people to fake cancer for social gain, for things like love or sympathy or attention. And social gain is a big category, and obviously you can do something for monetary and social gain. And I've found that sometimes people start faking for social gain and end up taking money sort of by and by and end up becoming both. And sometimes people start just trying to take money, but they like what being a cancer patient gives them socially in their community, and they slide into the social gain part too. But those are the two big ones, and there's a lot of overlap. And then I can talk about the smaller ones, but
Yeah, I do want to talk about the smaller ones, but those two, I mean, seem to be like the obvious motivators, right? The social gain, it's kind of like the way I think about it. It's like being invited to your own funeral, except you don't
yeah,
die, right?
exactly.
And all of a sudden, there's something about like learning that somebody is sick, or and all of a sudden their mortality clock starts ticking, and things that you would normally not tell them, you just start pouring out all this
Yeah.
affection, all these great memories. And describe that rush, because you've actually probably experienced that, right?
The rush of telling someone and seeing it change them, or
Oh yeah, just the rush of like somebody that would never express any emotion to you, like to all of a sudden start telling you how much they care about you and
yeah,
telling you all these great memories that you had.
it definitely puts someone in a strange position. And if they're not expecting to hear that, like Yeah, it makes people do funny things. I mean, some people it goes the opposite way, and they're so terrified of the fact that you have cancer, and they think about their own mortality and the fact that if someone like you, who's my peer, has cancer, that means I can get cancer, and that's really scary. And so some people run the other way, and they're like, I don't want to talk to that guy ever again. That scares the hell out of me. I don't even want to think about cancer. I don't want to be in the same room. But a lot of people go a different direction, and it's like, oh my God, I'm so grateful that that's not me. I feel so bad for this person. I am ready to crawl over broken glass for them. I am ready to go grocery shopping for them. I am ready to, be the shoulder to cry on. I will do anything for this person. um, and that's a really powerful instinct that can be manipulated if you're the kind of person who wants to manipulate people. And cancer fakers, a lot of them are really good at dripping the tragic information over time to sort of like, keep that melodrama high, keep people on their toes, keep people feeling that shock and that instinct to help and go out of their way to do something. And I'm not sure if I'm answering
No,
your
I
question.
think you are. I think you are. I mean, you're adding color to this whole idea of like people change around you, either like you said in a negative way, but also in a positive way. And I think when it comes to the financial and material gain part, a lot of listeners are probably listening to this. They watch all these documentaries about people faking cancer, podcasts, and they might come to the conclusion like, "Hey, GoFundMe. If I see a GoFundMe, you know what? When in doubt, go without. I'm not gonna like support the GoFundMe because how am I to know if these people are for real or not? How after having this experience of having cancer yourself and then also studying these people who fake cancers, how do you feel about the GoFundMe? Should you still give even though there's that small chance that somebody's faking it? Because it is a very small chance.
Right. Most people who say that they have cancer are telling the truth. I mean, faking cancer has gotten shockingly common. There's thousands and thousands of people doing this, but at the end of the day, most people who say they have cancer do have cancer. And so, my biggest fear in what I do is that I'm going to negatively influence the public to think that they need to be more suspicious about people saying they have cancer than they really should be, and that I'm going to hurt people who really do have cancer by increasing that level of doubt and making them explain themselves more than they should have to. Um, so I always think about that because I talk to a lot of people who have cancer these days, and it's different than it was 15 years ago because people are so accustomed to scams and know that faking cancer is a thing now. There's a lot of young people who don't look sick, who have cancer, who are actually afraid to tell their friends because they think that they're not going to be believed. And it's going to be this whole added thing where they have to keep proving that they have cancer. And that's really horrible to me. I mean, when you have cancer, that's the last thing that you need to be thinking about and worrying about. Like if your friends will believe you and having to prove your case. So this might surprise people, but I, as a cancer faking expert, I am willing to be, I would rather be fooled than close my heart to people who are sick, I guess. I would rather a cancer faker pulled one over on me once than I wasn't generous or kind to a person who was really sick. Um, there's no shame in assuming the best in someone in a difficult situation and being burned, in my opinion. Like the shame is all on the person who is taking advantage of you. But I don't contribute to GoFundMe's for people I don't know. Um, just because, and it's not even just faking cancer. I've just heard so many GoFundMe scam stories that like I don't want to contribute to something that might be a lie, but I also don't want to be so closed-hearted that I don't help people with cancer. So it's like it's a balance where if I'm compelled by a story, I'm going to do my own research basically and look into it and make sure that it doesn't seem suspicious. Um, but at the end of the day, I don't want to be so jaded that I don't look at cancer patients with empathy and with charity in my heart. Um, I'm not sure if that answers your question. It's a
No,
really
it definitely does because it's like at the end of the day, there is that risk that you're going to get fooled. But I mean, we don't want to live in a world where we can't get helped by our own community, right? Like that's
exactly, yeah. And I've seen enough of these stories where like there's people who really get taken for a ride for years, and it's like at some point they probably should have seen the writing on the wall or picked up on some red flags, but I don't ever want to go into the interaction like with a person who's sick primarily thinking like, is this a lie? How do I
Right.
disprove this? Because that's a terrible way to be with your
Yeah.
fellow human beings, and that's not how I would want anyone to be with me when I was sick, or if I, God forbid, if I get sick again. Um, but the doubt out there is real. I mean, there's so many people trying to take advantage of other people. In general, I think you just have to have a good head on your shoulders and be aware that anything could be a lie without letting it like poison your whole empathy process and make it so you can't, relate to people.
So the first two are social gain and material gain, right? But talk about some of the other categories like misdirection, illness swapping, and survival. Those might be a little bit harder for people to understand.
Yeah, and they're rare. They're outlier cases for sure. Misdirection is a situation where someone uses a cancer faking lie, not to make money or for social gain, but basically as a red herring, as a way to distract from something else they're doing. For example, a husband is having an affair in another state, and once a month he travels to another state to meet this woman in a motel or whatever. And he's telling his wife and family that he has cancer and he has a monthly treatment that he has to go to. And so he's not telling his family he has cancer because he wants them to really feel bad for them. He just wants the pressure off and wants an excuse to be able to go see his mistress once a month. Or more commonly, a person is committing a financial crime. They're embezzling money at work, or they're doing something that if it gets caught, they might go to jail. They're going to lose their job, and the pressure's on. Maybe some people are starting to look at the spreadsheets and be like, something's not adding up here. Who's the last person who did this? And that's when they're like, I can't answer that question. I actually have cancer right now. I'm going through this terrible diagnosis. And it can be like a way to delay for several months someone finding out that they've been cooking the books or that they've been, committing some crime. And it also happens a decent amount like during court proceedings where someone is going to be sentenced for some unrelated crime, and to try to get leniency in sentencing or try to delay the proceedings, they tell their lawyer to tell the court that they have cancer and they need to go through
I've
treatment.
seen
So that
I've seen that happen. Yeah.
you've seen that happen. Okay, so
Oh
they
yeah.
can't be at the sentencing, or it just throws a
I,
wrench.
it might not be cancer, but it's some sort of
Right.
crazy medical incident that
Exactly.
delays the inevitable.
So
But
that
yeah,
those
that's interesting.
Yeah, those are pretty utilitarian, like red herring kind of. It's not about the cancer itself. It's not about playing that character. It's more just like literally kind of a get out of jail free card. And then there's illness swapping, which is when someone really is physically sick, but they're physically sick from something that isn't cancer, and they want people to think it's cancer because having cancer would be less embarrassing or more socially acceptable than what they actually have. And that's because the condition that they have is something like late stage alcoholism. They're in liver failure and they look really bad. They look really sick. And so saying that they have cancer explains why they look physically sick. It explains why they have to go to the hospital all the time. It explains maybe why they are asking for some money to deal with some treatment or some groceries or something. And it's like, it's easier to say I'm dying of cancer than it is to say, yeah, I've been drinking again on the liver transplant. I couldn't stop, and I'm eventually going to die because I'm an addict. And it's often drugs, it's meth, it's heroin, it's whatever it is. But the cancer can be a convenient mask that explains why you look so bad, explains why you need treatment, and cancer is not your fault in the same way that being a drug addict is to a lot of people. It's harder to blame someone for having cancer, and people are a lot kinder and willing to help and willing to forgive someone if it's a terminal cancer diagnosis versus something that's seen as your own fault.
Yeah.
Um,
And
one
then, oh yeah,
Real quick, Javier,
oh
an,
yeah,
an extraordinary example of this is that back in the 1980s, during the AIDS epidemic, a lot of gay men who got HIV and AIDS, we lived at a time when that was socially not acceptable. You'd be shunned. People thought you were evil in some quarters, even. And so, tragically, a lot of those people, a lot of their families, had to say that they had late stage cancer just so they could get in a hospital, just so they could get in a funeral home and be buried with their family, because a lot of people in the 80s would have said, no, I'm not letting someone with AIDS, into my funeral home. Those people
Right.
are sinners. They're going straight to
Yeah.
hell. But if they had cancer, then they're an empathetic human being who deserves your love and your services.
Yeah.
And so
I never
thankfully
thought about it
that's
that way. Yeah,
yeah, so
actually.
thankfully that's not the situation anymore. But over time, yeah, cancer can be a stand-in for socially unacceptable illnesses and drug addictions and things like that.
And it's interesting because, like, in that scenario, like, and you could almost, it's like the least worst way of faking cancer, right? Because
Right.
it's like you could understand why even somebody who had AIDS would say that they had cancer just because it was
Absolutely.
such a socially unacceptable thing, to be gay, or the
Right.
panic that was going on around that time. Yeah, I
And you're not
remember that.
hurting anyone with that lie. You're not you're covering for something so that you can access a service or
Yeah,
access your own dignity. You're not
yeah,
going out of your way to trick people or lie to people or
right.
take anything from people. But maybe the most socially acceptable type of faking cancer, I think, is this survival category. And you could say that the people with AIDS is sort of in that survival category as well, in a way. But the survival category are these rare situations where faking cancer is a way to preserve your life or your health. And the best example I can give you, the most common one, is like a husband is abusing his wife. He's violent, he's mean, but when his wife says that she has cancer and is sick, he stops hitting her and he stops being mean to her and he starts having some compassion and helping her out, and he starts being the husband that she wants him to be all of the time. And so the message to the faker is like, this is the only way I'm going to survive and thrive in this marriage. This is the only way this man will treat me with dignity and respect, as if they think that I'm a victim of a disease that's not my fault. Um, so I've seen that a number of times. I've got a text conversation ongoing with a faker who did this, and uh, ended up going to jail for 5 years because it all fell apart, and she took benefit money and the courts went really hard at her. Um, and something I've learned from talking to cancer fakers in this situation is that the news media often gets it wrong, often sensationalizes the case, and if there's money taken, makes it all about the money. And there's an assumption that if someone took money, obviously they faked cancer because they wanted to take money. What I've found is often the case is someone fakes cancer because they're trying to survive their marriage or they're in a really desperate place, never had any thought to take money, but because this is America and cancer costs money, people, good Samaritans, will throw a benefit. They'll give you money, and it puts the faker in a really tough position where it's like, A, I take the money to keep this lie going and not have to admit what's going on, which is the easy way, or B, I don't take the money and I come clean and I say I've been faking cancer and now everyone hates me and thinks I'm a monster. And it's like you don't want to do that in the moment, so you take the money even though you didn't
They're in
plan.
too deep.
You're in too deep, and the second you take the money, you're a criminal. You've committed fraud, and that's what people go to jail for. That's what people get prosecuted for. Um, so
But
there's
what's interesting about the way you talk about it, especially even being a cancer survivor yourself, is the amount of empathy you have for these people, because we so easily villainize these people, and most people think about the social gain and the material gain category, but you just brought up a whole bunch of different scenarios where it might be socially acceptable, or like, or not socially acceptable, but at least you could understand why they did what they did, right?
yeah, it's a whole spectrum. I mean, there are people out there who are just like, I need to make some money. People trust people with cancer. People feel bad for people with cancer. It's the perfect lie. So I'm going to make a GoFundMe. I'm going to milk people out of their money because I want to buy a car and pay my rent, and that's just how I'm going to live. Most people who fake cancer are not premeditated planners like that. It's a desperate reaction to a desperate situation in someone's life, whether it's an abusive relationship or just really deep, dark depression and lack of meaning in their life. Like, very few people are faking cancer because everything's okay and they just kind of want to lark and want to see how people react. Um, it's hard to justify most of their actions, but I think it's usually easy to see the human longing and the dark need for something like this in people's lives because just people are going through a lot of really hard stuff.
Yeah. One thing I want to talk about is what listeners can do to and how they should react to this information, right? So, like, I remember watching your TikTok video and you start telling your own journey with cancer. And I mean, the first thought that came across my mind was like, is this guy faking cancer? Like, how do I know? But then you go through the process of like actually showing scars or and did you feel the need to validate that your own cancer journey because this stigma now exists that people question everything?
I don't know if I feel the need, but like I recognize the potential irony in the faking cancer expert faking their own cancer to be the like there's a whole ball of twine there that you could see that being this meta sort of postmodern performance art. And that's not what I'm doing, but I'm self-aware enough to like be able to nod at that sort of
No, but that's not what I was getting at. I'm not implying that you were faking. I'm just saying that you almost felt the need to prove to people, even, I don't even know if that was conscious. Like you showed this mold thing in, it was at the chemo. I'm not familiar enough with the terminology. Like in some of your videos, you're like, hey, this is proof that I went through this. When people are watching these social media videos, because it is kind of like this weird phenomenon that's happening now. You identified it with millennials and especially like women, that people are using cancer as a way to gain sympathy. But as consumers, should we be looking out for signs that, hey, this claim is legit? Oh, she has a scar, or she really did lose her hair. Like, what should we look out for as just passive viewers?
Yeah, there's a few common red flags that I see among a lot of cancer fakers. In general, I don't think you should like be looking to disprove someone's cancer claims because again, most people are not lying. There's some pretty obvious red flags that I think anyone could pick up on, whether it's faking cancer or faking anything, which is just a person really going out of their way to publicize and try to make things go viral and just try to, ratchet up as much attention about a tragedy as possible. But it's tough because a lot of people are doing that with legitimate tragedies too, because like our economy runs through things like GoFundMe for a lot of people. Like that's how a lot of people survive, is by doing numbers on social media, getting paid by TikTok, getting those views. I find some of the red flags that I see with cancer fakers is that, at least in your own life, is that they refuse to share details about the diagnosis. Like they're very open about the fact that they have cancer. They talk about the fact that they have cancer a lot, but they never talk about like what treatment they're doing, what the name of their doctor is, like some difficulty that happened at chemo or whatever. Like there's just no details.
Yeah,
And it
and
might be
that's
hard.
how to spot a lie too, right? When somebody
Right.
tells you, like if there's no details, it's like that person wasn't there, right?
Right. It's like if I tried to convince you that I'd fought in a foreign war, but I never mentioned anything about like what any of the battles were like or
Or the
what the terrain was
temperature.
like or who I served with. It was just always like, yeah, I'd smell the smoke in the morning and it's changed me. It's changed me. You see that and it's changed me. It's like there's no color there. There's no detail. Um, Maybe that's a stupid analogy, but like
No.
uh, and another big red flag is that people will say that they only want to do their appointments alone. They don't want to let anyone go with them. They don't want any help. They're a total lone wolf about it. And I want to be clear, there are people who have cancer who want to be lone wolves about it, but generally those aren't the people who are also publicizing the fact that they have cancer online and talking about it all the time. So it's this
Those two things don't
Right, it's
make
this
sense.
contrast between I want to talk about having cancer all the time, but I'm never going to share any actual details, and I don't want anyone to be in the room with me. It's just
Yeah.
all the general
Yeah.
discussion of it.
And in my experience, talking and looking at cases similar to this, they generate a lot of documentation. Even though they're the lone wolves, right, that go to the doctor by themselves, their spouse or loved one or whatever doesn't go to these sessions with them, but they're sometimes talking with the actual doctor over the phone.
Yeah.
There's email
Yes.
correspondence. I
Yes.
mean,
I
they
mean, there's
make it very believable, right?
totally, and I mean, in real cancer, you've got all these pill bottles, you've got all these. It's not, it's not just chemo. It's like you've got sleeping pills and nausea pills and all these,
Yeah.
subsidiary medications just to manage symptoms and stuff. Like it looks like your house is a small pharmacy with all the medical devices and stuff. And a lot of people just don't have that. They will like have one bottle of pills with TikToks in it or
Right.
something. TikTok.
Tic Tacs. Yeah.
Tic Tacs, sorry, yeah. They'll like have Tic Tacs like Royal Tenenbaums. They'll just have like some candy in a thing.
Yeah.
And it's kind of shocking to me how often people will fake cancer without really doing their homework about what
Mm,
cancer looks like and
yeah.
will just sort of wing it
Yeah.
and won't be called on it for a long time because young people don't really know what it looks
Yeah,
like.
I
It's
wouldn't know
easy
how to have
easy
a
to lie, yeah.
conversation. Yeah, like unless I've been through it, I don't know what the procedures are like. I don't know how you're supposed to be feeling. And I can't remember if this was you that mentioned it or somebody else, but you know, faking cancer is all about control, right? And so
Yeah.
one sign that you could tell if you're in a relationship and things are going south and all of a sudden somebody has like a very life altering disease like cancer or something else, that should be a red herring too, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely a red flag. I mean, so social gain is like the big category. One of the most common sub reasons within that social gain is definitely to control a romantic relationship and often to prevent a breakup. So I see this all the time where someone is like getting dumped, and that's when they're like, wait a minute, you need to know. I just got this diagnosis a few weeks ago. I'm
Mm-hmm.
actually maybe dying. So it's like, are you sure you're gonna break up with me? It's like you're gonna be a terrible person if you break up with me because I'm dying. Wouldn't you rather not break up with me and take care of me and just sort of slide back into this relationship? But it's also the flip side too. Sometimes a person is in an abusive relationship or a relationship they don't want to be in where they are not in control, and the way that they exert control and get out of the relationship is by saying, I have cancer, I can't do this, I have to go to treatment, I have to get out. So it really goes both ways, but it is about control, because when someone thinks you have cancer and they're willing to help you and do anything for you, I mean, they're wrapped around your finger. You can emotionally manipulate them to extreme degrees, and that's really the end point for a lot of people. Most people who fake cancer don't have an exit strategy. They don't have a plan where in 6 months I'm going to say that the treatment worked and I'm going to wrap this up and grow my hair back and get back into my normal life. Like most people are not thinking like that.
Yeah.
They're thinking, how am I going to maximize this today? How am I going to maximize this in this conversation I'm in right now? They are living in the moment. They are compartmentalizing. They are often not thinking about the inevitability that this is all going to blow up down the road because they're not, faking it well enough that people aren't going to catch them. But they're really just living in the moment, living in the conversation, and trying to get what they can now.
Yeah, and I think that one of the most common ones, the ones where we watch on Netflix and listen to in our podcasts, are the people that are almost similar to Munchausen by proxy. I think you mentioned it was Munchausen by internet, which that
Mhm.
seems to be very prevalent outside of cancer too. Like
For
people
sure.
fake stalking, people fake all kinds of stuff just to
Yeah,
garner attention from people on the internet, right?
absolutely.
Yeah, I
And
don't know
people
if you had,
fake pregnancy a lot. I
yeah,
didn't even know
yeah,
that, but a lot of
the
yeah,
doulas, yeah,
yeah, people fake pregnancy and then they fake a miscarriage and then they'll fake pregnancy again. And
yeah,
it's like the cycle
right,
of
right,
yeah, it's crazy how much people will fake online. There's really
yeah.
nothing that's too serious or too insignificant that people won't fake it.
Well, I appreciate it, man. I know that you're tired, and you've had a long week, but I
Yeah.
think we'll end it here in terms of how should like people like myself and the media cover these stories. Are we covering it wrong? What can we do better?
I don't know about people like you who have podcasts. I think the news media has covered it wrong, because by the time a story gets to the news media, it's like, first of all, you don't have a lot of time on a TV news segment, or it's a 30 to 60 second
Yeah,
report. it's usually milked for max shock value, and it's usually focused on like how freaking horrible the perpetrator is, what a monster they are to do this to other people. And I think that's an understandable reaction, but like I guess I would just say that most of the people who fake cancer aren't fundamentally different than you or me. They're not some other species, they're not some monster. They're just people who are in desperate situations, oftentimes, or who are mentally unstable, have underlying mental health conditions that are not being addressed, have deep voids in their life that in the moment this seems like a rational way to go about the world, to get love, to get money, whatever it is. So I would advise just not assuming evil in other people and trying to look at like the material and social conditions that caused a cancer fake. And ultimately, I would say like you've got to have some room in your heart for people to come back from something like this, because a lot of the people who do this 5 years down the road, like they're not going to stand by it. They're going to apologize. They're going to say it's the worst thing I ever did. If I could do anything, I wish I could undo that. I would kill to undo what I did. So I just don't want people to be permanently villains if they're open to change, if they're open to looking at themselves. And there are cancer fakers who never change, who continue to lie and steal and never really look at themselves, and they're serial criminals, basically. But I think a lot more people make a terrible mistake, realize they make a mistake, and have to like crawl back into normalcy in their life. And that's really hard. And ultimately, they are the victims of their own lies. And so I don't want to pile on and villainize people. I want to allow that exit ramp out of the scam and back into a world where they can seek validation in ways that aren't duplicitous, where they can seek love and affection in ways that are genuine. And I always just want to leave that door open for people if they're willing to do the work to change and examine themselves. And the last thing I'll say is that the cancer fakers I've seen who have survived faking cancer and who have managed to rebuild their lives and have a family and have a job or whatever it is, they all did many years of therapy. It didn't just click one day that they were okay and they weren't going to do that anymore. Like they all had to go through the hard work of figuring out why they did that, how they hurt people, apologizing, and like getting on a different path. And some people use religion for that. Some people are atheists and it's, you know, all within them or whatever. But like people can change. And so I just want to allow that possibility for anyone who fakes cancer.
Yeah, it's like trying to identify the impulses and like recognizing them right before they get out of hand. Because like you said, some of the stuff snowballs that once the lie is in full force, you have to like just keep it going, right? But
if someone is a terrible drug addict and does terrible things and tries to get clean, I'm not going to hold it over them for the rest of their lives that they were a drug addict 10 years ago and did terrible things. It's like you were going through a terrible time in your life. That's what happened. It was awful. You did some bad things, but like, let's get back on the path.
the faking cancer part is the symptom, not
Usually,
the problem,
yeah,
right?
it's a symptom, and there's a lot of incentive in this crazy world to do something like that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, I just don't want to blame the individual. Usually, I want to look at it on a larger societal level of like, why are so many individuals compelled to do this?
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it, man. That's such a unique perspective that you bring into this, and I know that's something I hadn't heard when I consumed some of these stories, and even when I talk to the victims, they're not nearly as compassionate as you. But being,
Understandably, I wouldn't tell anyone who's been directly scammed by a terrible cancer faker that, oh, you should just forgive and forget automatically. I mean, that's really hard to do when you're the one
right,
who's been lied to. And you know, there's people like Belle Gibson and Amanda Riley in some of these big cases where there's not a lot of remorse being shown.
yeah,
And so I don't expect people to be like, oh, Belle Gibson's actually a great person, like we shouldn't be hard on her or whatever. It's more the not famous cases and the people who are willing to do the work to be real people again.
yeah.
So
This happens a lot more than we even realize, right?
it
Because
really does,
not
yeah.
all of them get Netflix docs, right?
Not all of them get Netflix docs, thankfully, yeah.
Yeah. But
Um,
man, Bill, thank you so much.
yeah, thank you for the questions.